Our farm is on the Queenscliff Port Arlington Road. It's 157 acres and we run sheep on it and do cropping, and we also have a 1,200 tree olive grove. When we bought the place in 1979, it was really barren. There were a few old remnant red gums down the bottom there, and that was about it as far as native vegetation was concerned. There was a lot of environmental weeds, flaxleaf broom, and also some exotics, palm tree, pepper trees, cypresses, but just the remnant red gums as far as native vegetation. Apart from that, the dams were all pretty bare, and there was a really deep erosion gully going right through the property for about 800 metres. That was very barren, totally bare. Initially we thought it was a bit of a liability, but when my father saw it, he recalled the time when he was growing up in Queenscliff as a boy, just after the First World War, when they used to come out this way in a pony and trap and have picnics along the creeks. And he remembered these creeks as being beautiful places. He remembered big old trees and tall timber and mossy banks and ferns. And so that was the vision right from the beginning, to get it back to something like it used to be. Well, the first thing we did, of course, was to fence the cattle out, and then we started planting. And it was a bit different in those days to plant natives. Most people were still planting exotics, and so a lot of people didn't really approve of what I was doing. But anyway, I pressed on regardless. Yes, I got a lot of support actually from Land for Wildlife, because I got involved in that right at the beginning of the program, or pretty close to the beginning of the program, and they used to send out information sheets, and I was looking recently at some of the first ones that are dated in 1990, and they were really excellent, and a lot of the guidance they gave and the advice is pretty much mainstream environmental good practice these days. I've also had a lot of support from the Bellarine Catchment network and the Bellarine Land Care group. In fact, the fencing off of the old trees down there from the cattle we had in those days was with that assistance. And more recently I got some support for putting in understory along the gully and for getting rid of weeds. As well as financial support, they've provided a lot of guidance and advice. I guess that the preparation of the land is the critical thing, because in the beginning I'd just dig a hole in the long grass and put the plant in, put the tube stock in, and these days I've found that if you prepare the soil and the land, then they grow a lot more quickly, and if you guard them appropriately and if you mulch them. I think one of the critical things is actually mulch. And another critical thing is using appropriate plants. If you use locally indigenous plants, then they grow so much better than plants that aren't naturally suited to the area. We're still a functioning farm, and we harvest 1,200 olive trees every year. Last year we harvested 10 tonnes of olives. We still have sheep on agistment here on the farm. We've found that the revegetation has actually assisted in these other functions, and with a wider range of birds we find that the birds are keeping the insects under control in the olives, so we don't have to resort to using poisons there. Well, we think the farm's a much better place to live on with all this vegetation. It looks a lot better. It's a much more pleasant place to live because we don't have the extremes of the wind blowing through. We get lots of wildlife and bird life around, which makes it a very pleasant place to be. Plus you get the advantages on the farm of better shelter for the animals and better habitat for the wildlife.
So I reckon it's really amazing, Alex, what Rosalind and Robert have been able to achieve with this property over the course of 30 years.
Yeah, I guess it clearly demonstrates that techniques and information has evolved over time.
Yep.
And from the early advice of planting exotic trees, then to Australian natives, and now local indigenous species to present day. But also herbaceous understory and grasses and lilies, those ground covers.
And I think being open to that new information that the programs we implement, such as Caring for Our Country and the State Land Care Facilitator project, is really important and really helpful to have those resources available.
Yeah, and these landholders have done such a fantastic job because of those support programs. They're so critical to achieving this, and landholders can really protect Swan Bay down in the catchment by controlling their sediment and their nutrient loads, and they're protecting the juvenile fish nurseries and the migratory waders that fly up and down the east coast. So it's great that people can actually be involved in that.
Absolutely. And what we've ended up with is a wonderful working template of sustainable land management, a healthy ecosystem, and wonderful biodiversity corridors as well, which is really useful for us to be able to take to other landholders and the broader land care group on the Bellarine and share those learnings.
And the beautiful thing is, it's actually a lifelong learning process. You're basically never done.
That's right, you're always learning.